Sorry we are late, but we had some technical difficulties, and the first segment of the show is not worth it if I can't show the video. So I had to get techie, figure it out. Finally, StreamYard, I am an expert. I know how to play a video. Give me some cheers in the comment section. We're going to talk about Cam Newton and his comments about Brock Purdy. We're going to talk about Brandon Ayuk, the San Francisco 49ers' biggest threat to the Super Bowl that isn't injuries. It's actually a team. We're going to talk about all of that plus more next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Tuesday night, which means I've got my guy, So Real, Sunil, in the building. What's up, Sunil?
Look, man, I know you say it's Tuesday, so I got So Real Sunil on, but let's be realistic. It's Tuesday, so I may have So Real Sunil on just in case one of the other shows that I do doesn't bump this one off.
Or he's not on vacation, or traveling, or whatever he's got going on, work. I'm just as much the back burner as you are to me. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
That's
throwing it out there. I've just thrown it out there.
I like Motor just says, "Sup, gangsta nerds."
What up? What up? All right, guys. So I've removed the overlay because I'm going to play a video, and this is going to lead us to the first topic at hand, which is Cam Newton. And Cam has his own YouTube channel, absolutely killing it. He's well over 1 million subscribers. He's doing his thing, but he had an opinion on the MVP. And there's a short clip that's floating around. Actually, his comments are after the Eagles game, but they made their way around social media today. And it was a much shorter clip, so I wanted to play most of it so that you guys get the gist, and then you can come to your own conclusion. So let me bring this. Okay. Let me rewind it here. We'll play it from the beginning, and then we'll discuss it, Sunil. I don't even know if you've seen it, but here goes.
Be a game where you literally put the whole team on your back, though. Christian McCaffrey does that so well, so often, that we can take his greatness for granted. But Brock, they're not winning because of him.
He's not turning the ball over.
He's managing the game. And if we were to put that in its own right as game managers, this may ruffle a lot of feathers, but it's honest. Brock Purdy, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, and really, Dak Prescott. These are game managers. They're not difference makers. Christian McCaffrey, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, they're impacting this game in only way that they know how. So in one side, you have game managers that is in these discussions of MVP.
And when you say game manager, I'm not asking you to go out and win the game. I'm just asking you not to lose.
Not to lose the game. Exactly. Like, we've seen it. Like, Dak's responsibilities for this year is not going out and throwing for 400 yards, 300 plus yards. Has he been doing it? Yes. But that's not needed for us to win. When you have a defense that's extremely stingy, when you got a guy on the opposite side of the ball of you that is owning the NFL record for pick sixes in a year.
Yeah.
Listen, motherfucker, I don't give a damn what you do. You don't have to score every time. You just don't have to throw a pick every time either.
Yeah.
That's a different type of discussion. So with that being said, I'm saying, like, yo, if we're gonna really call a spade, there's a difference between managers of the game and difference makers of a game. That's not to say that they can't win the MVP.
Correct.
But it just is what it is. And if I were to say a game manager to win the MVP has to be Jared Goff, because he means a lot to the Detroit Lions.
And your game changer is?
My game is Christian McCaffrey.
Okay, let me remove this here. before it bogs everything down. Okay. What are your initial thoughts of that, Sunil?
My initial thoughts are that outfit is
So I don't
phenomenal.
know the exact reference. I think it's a Disney reference, like a Disney
it?
Christmas movie
I
reference or
didn't know if it
something.
was the Nutcracker type.
Something
'Cause
like that. There's
it was something.
he talked about it later in the podcast because somebody said something. The other guy that's on the other end made a reference to his outfit, and he's like, "It's a movie, like it's a movie reference." And I was like,
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
what movie it is,
Yeah,
but
I
all
wasn't
right.
mad at it. I thought it was phenomenal. I couldn't pull it off, but
He's
clearly
always
he
been
can. You
eccentric.
know
We
what I
know
mean?
that.
Yeah,
So
exactly. My initial thoughts are I feel like this is getting played out
Mhm.
because he contradicted himself a few times. So he was he was saying that there's these game managers and then there's impactful players that are at a different level that impact the game in a way that they can only impact. And he put in that category CMC, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes. I don't think there's anything wrong with that in the sense that the three players that he listed that I just mentioned do impact the game different than the quarterbacks that he mentioned. But for some reason, it seemed like he was putting down the quarterbacks like Dak, Tua, Purdy, and Jared Goff. But then he did state that you can win an MVP if you're a game manager. And to me, if you could win an MVP, you could win a Super Bowl. So if you're the caliber of quarterback that could go out there and win a Super Bowl, then what does it matter if they name you system quarterback, game manager, or elite game changer? I guess was the word that he was mentioning. To me, all that matters is can you help your team win a Super Bowl? I think the thing that I disagree with him is that Brock Purdy doesn't do anything that's causing the 49ers to win a game. I think that Brock Purdy has done things that have helped elevate this team to win games. One of the reasons why I think it's taking away is just because he does have a team around him where he's not always put in situations where the level of his play gets the credit for it being a difference maker in the win because their defense is so good. But his ability to open up this offense, his ability to be the perfect grade of gasoline to help this machine run at its optimum level is what helps this team be as dominant as they are. Right? When they're winning by over two scores per game. And when they're losing losing very close games. So to me, that is an element of Brock Purdy being there. Now, do I think that Brock Purdy without Christian McCaffrey is as successful as Christian McCaffrey and another quarterback in this offense? I'm was the guy last year that was saying the biggest change for this offense was CMC. And I don't think it's hard to argue that CMC makes this game a lot easier for whomever's playing quarterback. But I'd also think that Brock Purdy has done enough this year to separate himself from just a guy who's a product of the people around him and not get credit for the level of play that he's bringing to this team.
Yeah, I think so. The reason I wanted to play the whole clip is because the Brock Purdy part is what is floating around, and I think that that's what reading in the chat. Most people are talking about the Brock Purdy part of the conversation, which I knew was going to happen. Really, what I took from the conversation is that, first of all, when he talked about system quarterback, he went way harder on Dak Prescott than he did any of them. Right? Like he named Dak, and then he used Dak as the example and why he is a quote unquote system quarterback. And then, but his overall arching point was he thinks CMC is the MVP because CMC is a true difference maker in his opinion. Now, I also knew, and listen, don't take it personally, but these are the ones that I starred. There was many more than this. Cam wasn't a difference maker. Why are we listening to this washed up bum? Sounds like he's hating on Brock because he can't play anymore. I think one of the comments that Will Blackman said is former DB, for those that don't know. Cam was an MVP in this league. He does deserve an opinion, whether you agree with it or not. I do find experiments like this interesting because when JT O'Sullivan says what we like, or who's the other one that's Chase Daniels, Orlovsky, Chase Daniels, when they say what we want, then it's right because they were pro quarterbacks, and so we got to take their word as gospel. But when Cam, who actually did a hell of a lot more in this league than any of those guys, says something, he's a clown, he's a hater, he's jealous, he didn't do anything in his career. But those other guys did. Like, what did they do with their career that Cam didn't? Like, we do have to remember that Cam, regardless of whether you agree with his opinion or not, to then attack his credibility as a player, I think is the wrong way to do it, because Cam Newton in a 16-game season put up 4,500 total yards, led a 15-1 team, and had 45 total touchdowns, throwing to Devin Funchess. Okay, so if anybody can talk on what it takes to be an MVP in this league and actually being the reason that your team is what it is, or the main reason, at least offensively, I think it's Cam Newton, regardless of what you want to say about his career after that or before that, or what he did in the Super Bowl or any of that stuff, how he dresses. You can't take away that he won an MVP and he was deserved of that award and was throwing to Devin Funchess. Okay, so he does deserve to have an opinion in this conversation. And for me, I didn't take a lot out of the Brock Purdy side of things. I took more out of the CMC side of things and the Dak Prescott side of things than anything. But I knew that it was going to go the Brock Purdy route. I just find it funny that he's not credible, but these other guys who back up our opinion that weren't near as good as Cam, we can call a spade, they deserve to have an opinion, but Cam doesn't. I just find that funny.
Yeah, and I think, the conversation is, is relevant right now because Brock Purdy is number 2 when it comes to MVP vote or MVP odds right now behind Dak Prescott. So the question is, should Brock Purdy be considered an MVP when he has, so many guys around him that are talented? And it's the whole chicken or the egg argument. Is the talent around him having the type of year that they're having because of Brock Purdy, or is Brock Purdy having the type of year that he's having because of the talent? And it's just normal NFL debate. And ultimately, it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters to the players on the 49ers. We know it doesn't matter to Brock Purdy. Ultimately, they're thinking of one thing and one thing only, and that's winning a Super Bowl. And do we believe that Brock Purdy can be the quarterback of this team and win a Super Bowl? To me, it's undeniably yes, because of what they've been able to do against Super Bowl caliber teams this season and how they've been able to go out there and dominate with Brock Purdy as quarterback. There's no reason he's not going to be they're not going to be like, oh, we would have won if we had a better quarterback. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and I don't think the conversation ever should have been that. I mean, that's something we talked about in the offseason. And I said, hey, if they don't win this year, you can't say that it's Brock Purdy's fault. You're going with a young quarterback, expecting him to deliver you a championship. You blamed Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo was the reason you couldn't win, supposedly. So now you've got another chance here with Brock Purdy with this high-powered team. If something happens, even if he is god-awful and let's say an NFC championship or a Super Bowl, throws 3 interceptions, can't blame Brock Purdy. What do you expect from him? You expect that he's going to play perfect always? If he does, that's a bonus. But ultimately, what happens this year comes down to the decision-making of Kyle Shanahan all the way through. You cannot blame Brock Purdy if they don't win a Super Bowl. Now, if they win a Super Bowl, you certainly can give him a lot of credit for aiding in that, but you don't get to then just blame solely Brock Purdy, 23-year-old quarterback in year 2, his first full year as a starter. That's not the way that this works.
Yeah, and I think even us as 49er fans who sometimes take some of the criticism to Brock Purdy personal have to understand, I think there's a difference between Brock Purdy being MVP, most valuable player, win a Super Bowl with this team, or being the right quarterback for this team. I think those are two separate things that a lot of us are joining together. I think it's very it's an argument to be made. Is Brock Purdy the most valuable player on this team? Let alone, so if he's not the most valuable player on this team, how can he be the most valuable player of the league, right? So I understand that argument that's being made out there, and I don't think I think it's an opinion. I mean, I don't think. I mean, it's so subjective. There's nothing objective about MVP. It's always kind of like a more of like a, was it like homecoming king, homecoming? Is more of just who's
Yeah.
most popular at the moment type of award.
Yeah, most certainly. And I think we had a conversation earlier. When I say we, Ryan and I, we were talking about Purdy as MVP. And a lot of people are worried that maybe Purdy won't get it because he doesn't play for the Dallas Cowboys like Dak. And my argument to that was, I actually think the story of Brock Purdy is a more popular one than Dak, who, yes, he's the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. That sells. But I wouldn't be necessarily as concerned about that because the story of Brock Purdy sells just as well as having the Dallas Cowboys star on your helmet and being that quarterback at this moment, because he was Mr. Irrelevant and everything he's doing, and also playing for a historic franchise. So I wouldn't necessarily be worried that he's going to get robbed out of the MVP because Dallas Cowboys star on the side of Dak's helmet. So I think he's got a good shot out of that.
And we have to be realistic. The 49ers just have just as much cachet as the Cowboys do. So having the SF on your helmet is just as important. I wonder actually who has more MVPs, Cowboys or 49ers. That would be interesting. I don't know the stats on that, but I'm sure it's close, if not 49ers with a little bit of an edge.
Oh yeah, most certainly. Most certainly. Matthew Sanders says hero ball is short-lived. Exhibit A, Cam Newton. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, he can't control the team that's put around him. You know, all he can do is go out and play football. And the funny thing is, I wasn't even a Cam Newton fan. In fact, I remember when he was going to the Patriots, I do have a friend that's a big Cam Newton fan. And I was like, this dude's washed. I'm telling you, he's not going to do any good. And he didn't. And every week I reminded him that Cam Newton was washed, and every week he hated me. But I'm not a big Cam Newton fan, but I'm not going to disrespect what Cam Newton did in this league, especially winning an MVP award and doing it by being a guy that didn't have a lot of weapons around him. And that doesn't discredit a quarterback that did it with a lot of weapons around him, but Cam saying what he's saying, I think if anybody can say it, it's him, because he did it with dog water around him in a lot of the areas. So,
well, I mean,
Matthew,
and once again, we're talking two separate conversations. Cam hasn't won a Super Bowl, right? So he's not talking about can these quarterbacks win a Super Bowl or not. I think if we put that conversation in context, he's talking about MVP, he's talking about difference makers. So it's not, you know, judging Cam and saying, oh, he's never won a Super Bowl, or he's never, you know, had as much success as Brock Purdy's having right now. All that is accurate, but I don't think that's the argument that's being made. We're joining in too many arguments. Is Brock Purdy MVP? Is he the best player on his team? I think if we're honest as 49ers fans, we know he's not. We think Trent Williams is more important. We think CMC is more important. So if he's like, let's say like at best third, because I think those two are definitely more important. We would say if CMC is gone, I don't think we feel like we're winning a Super Bowl. If Trent Williams is gone, I don't think we're winning a Super Bowl, right? So if he's not the most valuable player on our team, should he be the most valuable player of the league? I think that's an argument, that's a debate that's fair to have. And whatever side you fall on that, you can argue it both ways. I think I could confidently argue that both ways, but we shouldn't diminish the opinions when it's that. Now, if they're trying to say Brock Purdy is a terrible quarterback, this team can't win a Super Bowl with them, then I think, you know, that's a different thing. That's more hate.
Yeah, exactly. And also the whole, okay, you know, he's trying to get clicks. And well, of course, I think the name of the game is to get clicks, but you're talking about his channel has grown significantly. And the main part of the conversation was around CMC. And if he bashed anybody, it was Dak Prescott. He went in on Dak Prescott more than any of them. So
I think
he wasn't
bashed
going at
Purdy
Brock
as
Purdy
well.
from a hater standpoint. He was just giving his opinion on Brock and some of the other quarterbacks. Matthew says, being good at performing doesn't mean that you're good at teaching or analyzing. I agree with that. JTO breaks down tape and gives evidence. Irrelevant that he was a mid quarterback. This is not a shot. What I was saying, I want to be clear, and I'm not saying that you're saying this, Matt, but I want to be clear. I was not taking a shot at JT O'Sullivan. I've had JT on my channel. A year ago, he was on my channel. I love JT O'Sullivan. I watch his breakdowns. I same with Chase Daniels. I respect all these guys. My point is that what people do is funny to me. They take the opinion of a player, regardless of the player and the skill level, as gospel when it backs up their opinion. But the moment that a player comes out that says something that doesn't back up an opinion, now all of a sudden we want to discredit said player. And I just find those things interesting because I see it happen every single day. And this isn't just a Brock Purdy 49ers conversation. I see it all the time on Twitter with every team. I think everybody deserves a conversation or be able to have the conversation. Now, what I will say is people like JT O'Sullivan, if they're going to break down film, I certainly would highly recommend that JT O'Sullivan and those guys are watched for breaking down film a lot more than myself or somebody else breaking down film that hasn't played professionally or hasn't coached. 100%. But when it comes to evaluating talent, I don't believe that JT O'Sullivan or any of these guys can evaluate talent at a higher level than most people that have two eyes that watch the game and have for many years. I'm sorry, because if they could, they'd be getting paid stupid money to do so. They would be in front offices and there would never be such a thing as a bust. They also wouldn't compliment players in the past, like Jimmy Garoppolo, the way that they have, because they would have known that he wasn't a good player. They are great at breaking down film and teaching and analyzing. They are not better talent evaluators than most people that have watched the game on a regular basis. And I hold true to that. I mean, I had a conversation, Roscoe's, he has a super chat here. We'll get to him in a second. But in the chat, Roscoe's, you were there. Did I or did I not have a debate in Twitter Spaces with Antonio Cromartie about his rankings of quarterbacks? And I feel like most people left that room saying that I had better points than Antonio Cromartie did. He was an ex-player. He was a all-pro player, a Pro Bowl player, all those things. I don't know if he was all-pro. He was definitely a Pro Bowl player. Very good. But I don't believe that he knows more about what he's seeing at the quarterback position than I do just because he played football. So that's just the way that I see it. But if it's breaking down film, yes, 100%. They know a hell of a lot more than I do or you do. Roscoe says Cam is not qualified because he does not watch, in my opinion. I think that's a fair point. But because he was talking about CMC, who is an ex-teammate of his, I would venture to guess that he watches more 49er games than what you would think he does. Like, if he's just not watching any games and that's his opinion, I agree. But I think he's watching more 49er games because CMC is a player that he respects, played with, and enjoys. Probably thinks of him as a friend. Hound says BP is literally the MVP. He costs $900,000 a year. Yes, if you're going to add in costs, then there's no debate. Roscoe says yes, you cooked Cromartie. Also, Dak has performed high under different coordinators, and it shows that Cam don't watch. Are you saying that?
I actually agree. I actually agree with
go ahead.
Roscoe. I think Cam is just opinion based off of just feeling. I don't think if you ask him to defend his opinion and, hey, what are you seeing? What are you saying? I think that you can expose him very well just based off of what he was saying. Like, he was saying they're not winning games because of Brock Purdy. That statement to me negates everything that he was trying to build up before that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know what games he is or isn't watching. I would be curious. It would be nice if the host or whoever it is that's in the background like push back a little bit to give a difference of opinion. Like,
which he did, and that's what I'm saying. He said, well, Brock Purdy's not throwing any interceptions. And then his response was, well, they're not winning games
Ooh,
because of Brock Purdy.
I felt like he kind of led him in a positive way to kind of reinforce his opinion. So like, oh, so you're just saying like he's a game manager because he's not throwing interceptions. Like, oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. Versus like a lot of people hate Nick Wright, and Nick Wright is kind of a character, especially when it comes to Fox. But on his own YouTube channel, I like when he's on there because his son's on there, and his son challenges him all the time. Always is pushing back. They're always debating. That's what I wish Cam Newton's host would have done in this situation, is push back a little bit to see where it actually could have gone. Because I think it could have been a good conversation, but it was a little short-lived and one-sided. Roscoe says Dak balled out under Moore and now McCarthy. Yeah, definitely. I think Dak's fine. I don't have an issue with Dak, but I also wouldn't say Dak's elite. I'm curious as to your thoughts, Roscoe, if you think he is. Keith says Antonio Cromartie can't remember the name of all his kids. That's not saying much, Jesse. I don't know. I think when you have thousands of people listening to you and you have an NFL player that comes in the room and everybody bends the knee to him, it's kind of hard to have a serious conversation and do it confidently. But maybe you're right. That was hella funny though on HBO Hard Knocks. What he yeah, I got this one who's 5. Like he had like 7 kids that were 5 years old. It's so funny.
Yeah, he was quite the man on and off the field. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. That's so funny. All right. Let's talk Brandon Ayuk. And you threw me this topic, but you gave me no background to it. So I'm going to let you take the conversation where you want to take it, and then I will answer back to you. What is it about Brandon Ayuk that you wanted to discuss?
Brandon Ayuk, I think, is my favorite player on the team. And
slowly becoming mine too.
He's starting to get a little bit of praise for his blocking prowess.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that block that he's had multiple games where you can see him in multiple frames of a CMC touchdown, him just blocking down the field 60 yards and not giving up and all of this type of stuff. And there's a video that that Coach Yak posted, I reposted, and that's phenomenal, right? The mentality, the block price, perfect for a Kyle Shanahan receiver. But I didn't realize how historic his season is right now, Jesse. And I wanted to break that down and just share some of these numbers. So right now he's on pace for 1,377 yards and 8 touchdowns. So it'd be his biggest season, and that's that would finish, top 10 receiver as far as numbers. But here's the thing. He's 9th right now in yards for all receivers, but 40th in targets. So he's averaging 18.8 yards per catch, which is number 1 in the league by 2 yards. So I wanted to put some numbers together, right? And see what would it be if he actually had the targets of, let's say right now, Tyreek Hill is about to have the most yards of any wide receiver, like the most historic season, right? And he's in the MVP discussion. So Tyreek Hill has about double the catches and nearly 3 times the amount of targets. So I took Tyreek Hill's targets, and then I multiplied that by the catch percentage that Brandon Ayuk has.
Okay.
And then I figured out where he would be.
Okay.
So right now, Tyreek Hill is at 1,542 yards and 12 touchdowns. Okay. He's considered a candidate for MVP and on pace for the most historic wide receiver. If Brandon Ayuk had the same amount of targets, he would have 1,711 yards and 10 touchdowns. Close to 200 yards more than Tyreek Hill. And it's somebody who some of the fan base is like, trade him in the offseason. And so, like, to me, I've come out and I said, I think Brandon Ayuk will be the second best wide receiver ever in 49ers history behind Jerry Rice.
No, and you said third behind. Oh, okay. Because yeah. I got you.
I think
you said 49er receiver because T.O. technically didn't play his whole career here. Okay, I got you.
No. And I do think that he's going to go down as better than T.O. for 49ers.
Oh, for the
Yeah.
49ers. Okay.
For the 49ers.
To throw that distinction in there because that's very important for the 49ers. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
But what I'm trying to say is
Still going to take
the
a
only
while.
reason why he isn't being talked about as one of the greatest wide receivers right now is lack of opportunity, not of lack of ability.
Yeah.
So if he was unleashed and given the amount of targets that the top receivers are given, Jesse, I'm saying I think he's better than T.O. If he was given what T.O. was given as far as targets, responsibility, all that kind of stuff, he would have more stats than T.O. He would be a better wide receiver than T.O. He blocks better than T.O. I think he runs routes better. His personality isn't as wild as T.O., so he doesn't get as much of maybe the press, and he's not going to be as popular. But I think that he's going to have, if he's given the opportunity, he'd have a better career than T.O. He'd be a Hall of Famer. That's how much I think Brandon Ayuk is that good. And I'm showing you based off of if he gets the reps of the top guys in the league, his stats would be just as high, if not better. Then he would have a better year than Tyreek have if he's given the same amount of targets.
Okay, let's pump our brakes a little bit. I tried to give you the out. I was hoping that I was giving you the out, but you didn't need the out. You doubled, tripled, and quadrupled down.
Yes.
Okay. I love Brandon Ayuk, and I'm glad that you brought this up, this target rate and all this other stuff, because I had a conversation with my boy Radford, who was the Lions side of this channel for a couple years. He asked me, and this goes back to a very old debate, about a 3-year-old debate that I had with a Dallas Cowboy fan that he was involved in, which was who's a better receiver between CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Ayuk. And I said 3 years ago, Brandon Ayuk is better than CeeDee Lamb. Now, the only thing that you can do really to argue is show stats. And statistically, I didn't have a leg to stand on. But this year in particular, I do. And so when he asked me that question, he asked me again, and he said it kind of snarkily, thinking I'd be like, yeah, I was wrong. CeeDee Lamb's better. He goes, do you still think that Brandon Ayuk's better than CeeDee Lamb? I said, yes, unequivocally. And he's like, really? Have you seen CeeDee's numbers this year? And I said, yes, but let me show you how many more targets and catches he has. And once I broke it down for him, he's like, damn, you're kind of right. Maybe Ayuk is better than CeeDee Lamb. And right now, CeeDee Lamb is arguably the second best receiver in the league, at least statistically. Okay. So I love that you broke that down. I love Brandon Ayuk slowly becoming maybe my favorite player on the team as well. But I'm going to push back in the same way that I do when we have the Brock Purdy conversation, where everybody is so ready, willing, and wanting to crown players off of such short sample sizes, such small sample sizes, I should say, such short amount of career time, that it's like, can we just chill? Like, Terrell Owens is arguably the second best receiver of all time. I think Randy Moss, a lot of people would say T.O. I think if we gave him statistically this season, it would go down as one of the greatest seasons of all time. That is fantastic. But if he breaks his leg tomorrow and is unable to ever play again, that's it. You got to put together more than just a year or two. This is, when you're talking all-time greats, you've got to put together season after season after season. If you're going to be elite, it has to. Mike Evans has put together, 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Let me see at least half of that before we start having the conversation. Can I see half that before we have the conversation?
So I'm saying that obviously if health, all that kind of stuff, right? I'm saying just player versus player. And I see a lot of people trying to eat me alive in the chats, and that's fine. But can you pull up on your phone Brandon Ayuk's first 4 years? So this is his 4th year. Actually, I can do it. Hold up.
Let me bounce back on this one here. I don't have Fitzgerald in my top 10. Hot take. I don't have Fitzgerald in my top 10. So I wouldn't put him above Moss. That's just me personally. And Brandon Lloyd, I love him. Megatron, he was great. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to give you, we'll do a blind reveal. You tell me who the better receiver is. First
Okay.
4 years. 520 yards, 4 touchdowns. Second year, 936 yards, 8 touchdowns. 1,097 yards, 14 touchdowns. 754 yards, 4 touchdowns. Year 2, this is the second receiver. First year, 748 yards, 5 touchdowns. 826 yards, 5 touchdowns. 1,015 yards, 8 touchdowns. 1,053 yards, 6 touchdowns. You want receiver 1 or receiver 2?
Well, obviously, I think receiver 1 is going to be IU because the season's not complete. When a season's complete, he's going to have way more than 700 something yards. I would say blind reveal, being fair and looking at the numbers and not knowing who's who. I would say probably slightly receiver 1.
So receiver 2 is Ayuk's numbers.
Okay.
And
Oh, I
that's
thought it was
without
going to
a
be.
full season. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
I hold on. I thought receiver 1
So
was going to be.
Here-
Okay.
this is what I'm
okay.
gonna. This is
Okay.
all I'm saying.
I see. Okay.
T.O.'s rookie year, he
Yeah.
did 520 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Okay.
Brandon Ayuk's rookie year, 748 yards and 5 touchdowns. T.O.'s sophomore year, 936 yards, 8 touchdowns. Brandon Ayuk's sophomore year, 826 yards, 5 touchdowns. T.O.'s third year, 1,097 yards, 14 touchdowns. Brandon Ayuk's third year, 1,015 yards, 8 touchdowns. T.O.'s fourth year, 754 yards, 4 touchdowns. Brandon Ayuk's fourth year right now, not even finished. He's already at 1,053 yards and 6 touchdowns. So for people that are trying to say,
Okay. I see what you're saying. I apologize. I assumed that receiver 1 was Ayuk. It's funny because I outsmarted myself on this one. I thought it was Ayuk, and I was like, okay, his season's not finished, so that last number is going to go way above. So I'll take that, knowing where the season could go. Knowing now that the second one was Ayuk, not thinking, duh, he's gone over 1,000 yards already, and he still has time to go, then yes, naturally, on the surface, I would take receiver 2, which is Brandon Ayuk.
yeah, and what I'm saying is, look, obviously he has to have the same amount of career as T.O. to be able to be compared, because T.O. had longevity. He was at the top of his game. And all these people that are saying Brandon Ayuk is playing with better players, Brandon Ayuk or T.O. is getting bracketed, not in those first 4 years. T.O. was playing with this guy by the name of Jerry Rice next to him. So I don't know about if Brandon Ayuk's ever played with a player as good as Jerry Rice. So T.O. was getting the secondary. He wasn't the number 1 option in his first 4 years. I don't know about third year and fourth year, but I don't think he was number 1. He was playing with a good coach, a solid quarterback, all of those things. Where they were going to playoffs, all of those types of things. What I'm trying to say is what Brandon Ayuk is, the trajectory of where he is in just 4 years. If he continues at the rate and continues to progress, he will finish as the second best wide receiver in 49er history. And yes, I would pick him his first 4 years versus T.O.'s first 4 years. I am taking Brandon Ayuk over T.O. T.O. was never thought of as the blocker than Brandon Ayuk is. T.O. was never thought about as the route runner that Brandon Ayuk is. T.O. was bigger, faster, and could elevate higher than most corners that he was going up against. Brandon Ayuk is route running plus has the athletic explosion, and I don't think he's as big as T.O. is. So he's doing it in a different way than T.O. is doing it, but that's just me. I just believe that if health is there and he continues to progress and starts getting more targets and all that kind of stuff, he will go down and have a better career.
Man, it's so hard to compare eras too, because when T.O. was doing it, DBs could put your hands on or put their hands on receivers a hell of a lot more than they could now, right? And that makes it tough. It's easier to pass now today than it even was then. I just, man, if that comes true, we'll remember this Super Bowl take and we'll flash to it in 10 years and be like, here it is. But man, I can't go, dude. I can't do it. I can't do it. It's way too early to have that conversation. I want to say, hold on, where's this guy at? Are you saying like I think he's gonna break his leg or wishes he breaks his leg or something? I'm just saying in general, like if his career ended tomorrow, which it could, off of something freak, then yeah, well, we can't have that conversation yet. Keith says, I was kidding, man. All right. I don't even remember the comment, to be honest with you, Keith. Keith says, it's not that Ayuk blocks, it's that he seems more excited when he makes a block than a big catch. Yeah, he has that George Kittle enthusiasm when it comes to blocking. And that is one thing that I think not only myself, but a lot of people talk about with Deebo Samuel is we wish he could be Deebo Samuel when he didn't have the ball in his hands and could take as much pride in blocking as Brandon Ayuk. Every time you see a big play, to Sunil's point, Brandon Ayuk is usually somewhere blocking downfield. I wish you could get that from Deebo Samuel on a regular basis. I'm not saying Deebo's never done it. Sure, you can go find the couple clips here or there, but not at the same rate or effort that Ayuk does it play in and play out. He definitely does enjoy blocking. Dazza says, if we pay BA, can we sign Brock Purdy to a contract? Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Money can be moved around. Money can be moved around. I wouldn't be too worried about that. Roscoe's is mad at you. He says, that's casual, Sunil. T.O. is more explosive player, which Sunil did say later. Ayuk is not elite with the ball in his hands. He's not an elite playmaker like T.O. And then he says, that's a lie. T.O. was an excellent blocker. Lies. Yeah, I think T.O. was a good blocker. I don't know if he was
Ayuk
as
is a better
willing of a blocker as Brandon Ayuk, but he wasn't a bad blocker by any means.
And I think that the way Brandon Ayuk is used in this offense, he doesn't get the chance to show how great of a explosive player he is. He's not getting the screens. He's not getting the handoffs. He's not getting all of that. But how quick we forget about Brandon Ayuk's rookie season and what he did against the Eagles with that, spin move, hurdle, all that kind of stuff. Like Brandon Ayuk,
I was on a carry too, wasn't that an end around? He kind of took the Deebo role when Deebo was hurt.
When Deebo was out. And if you look at the 2 games Deebo wasn't playing this season, Brandon Ayuk's numbers were insane. They were really good. I think he had one where against Cleveland that game Purdy was terrible. I think he still had close to 80 yards on 6 catches, and then against Arizona, I think it was he had close to 150 yards when Deebo was out. So where people are saying, oh, he doesn't have, T.O. was more of a focal point and all that kind of stuff. I think that's hurting BA, that he's the secondary, tertiary option. I think that if he was given number 1 wide receivers opportunities, it would make my argument even stronger. I just put the first 4 years versus the first 4 years. To me, it's easy that Brandon Ayuk had better numbers in his first 4 years. Why wouldn't he continue that trajectory? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, I mean, T.O. was playing second fiddle to the greatest receiver of all time for those first 4 years, but he did eventually take over the number 1 receiver role and then switch teams, and we know the story there. But Brandon Ayuk is eventually going to take over that role. He is going to get his opportunity, much like T.O., and we'll see what he does with it. He certainly could be on pace to put up big numbers. I love that we are taking his numbers and trying to project what they would be. There's no guarantee. And by the way, this number could go up or down, but the rate of yards per catch might drop by a yard or 2, or it could raise depending on, how well he does when you have that many targets or catches. But I do think it's a good exercise. And I do think that it is the overall point before we got into the T.O. conversation is that Brandon Ayuk doesn't get enough credit in the league. We give him credit as 49er fans. The league doesn't talk about Brandon Ayuk enough. I think a lot of people are starting to notice how good he is. But if you really dive into the numbers could be phenomenal. We'll see where his career goes. Terrell Owens is a top 3 receiver of all time, though. I'm going to reiterate that point. So, I mean, sure, yes, after 4 years, that's a great point. I think we could do that with a lot of players. The other thing is Terrell Owens was obsessed, and I think Brandon Ayuk has a little bit of that in his game as well, where he's obsessed. And if he can continue to be obsessed once he gets paid and continue to want to be the best, then that's what will eventually carry him into being a great player, regardless of where he falls into the pantheon of greats. All right. Is there something you wanted to add? I feel like you wanted to say
No,
something.
I just
Like,
love the I love the debate in the chat. To me, I think it's wild that that people are just writing off BA like he can't finish his career the same way. I just don't see where people aren't seeing the same type of things. But I guess time will tell.
It's okay. I mean, I think people want to debate anything. We had a guy that wanted to debate his broken leg, his hypothetical broken leg. So people are going to debate what they want to debate. Okay, let's talk about this. And I did talk about this on my earlier show, and I'll give you my opinion first, and then you tell me what you think. I actually think that injuries are a little bit of a blessing in disguise, Sunil. And I say that because one thing we are seeing about this team that I was worried about going into the season, a lot of people talked about the offensive line and it was a question mark and all these other things. My biggest concern about this team was the depth. It seems like the 49ers do get a lot of injuries historically, although this year has been much better. And in the past, I felt like they had a lot of really good depth. This year, going into the season, at least, I thought that they had potential depth issues at corner. I thought that they had it on the offensive line and along the defensive line. I think the 49ers have done a fantastic job in building that depth, and it's shown through some of these injuries. And the reason I say it's a blessing in disguise is because these aren't long-term injuries, but you're starting to see some of these players that we haven't seen a lot of get their opportunities and step up and play very, very well, which gives me more confidence as a fan that once we get to the postseason, that if an injury or an injury does occur somewhere, hopefully it's not long term, but let's say somebody has to leave a game for a half or something like that, that some of these guys that are getting playing time now, if they are thrust into a role where they have to help us win a game, I have a lot more confidence now that they can do that than I may have week 4, week 5, something like that. So I actually am looking at these injuries as a little bit of a blessing in disguise based on the timing and them not being long-term as well. What do you think about some of the injuries?
Yeah, I mean, I think going into the season, a lot of people, like you mentioned, said that the depth of this team, especially on the defensive side, wasn't there. And I think it's been pleasantly a surprise to you guys. And, for me, I have so much faith in this front office between John Lynch and Adam Peters and Kyle Shanahan and his staff. They just know how to draft and they know how to develop. So there's always depth on the team. But when I say injuries are a concern, there are 3 players that I think if they go down injury-wise, it's going to be very, very tough for this team to win a Super Bowl. And those 3 players are Trent Williams, CMC, and Brock Purdy, right? So outside of those 3, I think that we still have a very, very good chance because of the depth, because of, just how these players and the system and how everybody's meshing. And maybe I would add, and not even maybe, I would add Fred Warner to that as well. So, and even with Nick Bosa, because I think they could probably absorb a Nick Bosa loss more than they can those 4 players that I mentioned. And this last week was a case in point. I mean, Eric Armstead was out for the game. In the game, I think Javon Hargrave and Mooney Ward were out. Oren Burks wasn't playing. And the defense still held Seattle to 16 points. They're averaging 15.8 points, the defense. And then they held Seattle to almost a touchdown less than what they usually score. Now, grain of salt, obviously their second string was in there, but the way second strings have been playing this season, Jesse, that's not always a negative, right? But I don't think in previous defenses they had that much depth where they could miss that many players, Jesse, and still be as dominant on the defensive side, right? We're already playing down our starting Pro Bowl, all pro safety. It's just the depth is there. This team is clicking on all cylinders, but those 4 players that I did mention, if any of those go down, then yeah, I think it's a huge concern.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're I don't think that my blessing in disguise take is holding any water right now if Trent Williams is out for the season. All right. Or CMC or Brock Purdy. I don't think I would be saying that. I think I'd be saying, here we go again. Gosh damn it, we're not going to win a Super Bowl. And it's because of freaking injuries. Can we ever get a break? That's what I would actually be saying. But because they aren't long term and because it's not those guys, that's why I say blessing in disguise. So yeah, I guess my concern when it does come to injuries is not the ones that are existing. I do still have a legitimate concern that injuries can happen in general. I mean, we see it happen every week in the league. Every time you go out there and you play a single snap, you're risking an injury. Hell, just practicing, you're risking an injury. And we know how injuries can derail a season. So I think really I've watched the 49ers in 2 different lights since 2019. I watched the game, and once the game is decided, my sights immediately go to, okay, can we win the second game, which is health? Can the 49ers get out of here healthy? That's what I want to know, because that is very important. And it seems like season after season, we couldn't get out of games healthy. And it's like we would win the game, but we couldn't win the war. And that is always a concern, especially when you do have some players that are a little bit older and have injury history. Yes, the overall arching thought of injuries, are they a concern? Absolutely. But am I concerned with the current injuries? No, I think that right now it is a bit of a blessing in disguise. So
So I know one thing you've been critical about Kyle Shanahan is the way he plays his players, puts them in injury situations. I know you weren't as hardcore about Kyle Shanahan was the reason Trey got injured. You weren't on that bandwagon, but you were not necessarily off the bandwagon either. But this year, the way that Kyle Shanahan has used his players, what is your belief as far as how is he keeping them safer? Is he still overusing them like you've said in the past? How do you feel like he's managed the health aspect of the players?
yeah, I mean, I think my take when the Trey thing happened was you can't necessarily put it all on Kyle, but the more times you put a player in a car crash scenario, the more times you're risking a serious injury. And that's exactly what happened. There have been times, I think, throughout the season where it's been frustrating. I would say as the season has gone along, he has gotten better about taking players out. I want to say this last week, maybe it was the week before. I think it was this last week. He wasn't as good as taking him out. I think on that final drive, there was CMC and Purdy and all of them were still in. I think the week before he did a phenomenal job. There have been times in the past, though, Deebo Samuel comes to mind where they were blowing out the Cardinals. He keeps Deebo in the game. Not only keeps him in the game, but he runs him on an in around and then he blows a hammy. So I think he has gotten a little bit better. It's not perfect, but he is getting better at it. So I'm not going to complain about it too much, but he has to continue to get better with it, in my opinion. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think earlier in the season he was overusing CMC, but I think he realized it. Right? He took the accountability for that, and then you started seeing Elijah Mitchell when he came back, and JP Mason and all that. I'm pretty good with the way that he's been managing. I don't think he puts Brock in bad situations. I think that a lot of people put a lot of blame on Kyle Shanahan and don't realize that it's really hard to take a Deebo out of the game. It's really hard to take a CMC out of the game because they don't want to come out of the game. Like you have to literally like force them off of the field. And there's that balance. Like they're out there wanting to play and you're telling them they can't play. Like I think that's something that you have to think about from a team chemistry coach's position as well. So I think I think it has been something that you could criticize about Shanahan. I think he's gotten much better at it.
Yeah, I agree. He has gotten better at it. James, safety's the league's not built like that anymore. The league's not built like that. And Ross knew this would come from somebody, and I'm glad that you said it. I did say I'm sure you can find a game and I'm sure you can find a play, but if you go back and you watch Deebo Samuel game in and game out, it was pointed out by Greg Pinelli and Eric Crocker last year about his lack of effort when he wasn't getting the ball, and it was awful. This year, you still see it a lot more than you don't. When he doesn't get the ball, he's not as willing to block as a Brandon Ayuk, play in and play out. That doesn't mean he never does it. It doesn't mean he hasn't done it. It doesn't mean that there aren't games that he does well with it. It's just overall, to this point, that's kind of who he has been. It would be nice if going forward, he is more what you're saying he was this last game. If he's that every game in and game out, I love it. Play in and play out, I love it. But when you're getting paid the way that he is and you have the lack of effort that he has had for a lot of those games, it is a bit frustrating. It is. All right. Brother Bob says, Sunil again. Just kidding. Not really. Cannot compare eras. It is tough to compare eras. It is. Dazza says, is Jair Brown better than Huff? I think they're different players. Jair Brown's playing really, really good, but let's not take away that Huff was a first team all-pro player last year. They're both very early in their career. What I would say is, and my biggest takeaway is not who's better. I think Jair Brown next to Gibson is a better pairing because there's not as much redundancy there. I think Huff and Gibson, neither of them are the most rangy safeties. Jair Brown has a lot more range, a lot more sideline to sideline speed and instincts. My biggest takeaway, though, is that Jair Brown and Hufanga, which I was worried about, can they play together? I think that they can play together very well and complement each other. And that, to me, is the most exciting thing. As far as who's better, I don't know, man. I think they're both good, and I'm glad that they're on the 49ers.
And I think both of them, if Huff comes back without any issues, like he still has his same athleticism that he had, they could end up having the most interceptions of a safety duo in the league when they're together. Because both of those guys have a knack for being where the ball is and, getting interceptions.
Yeah, most certainly. Dazza says Trent is probably the most important player on the team. I still think either Washington. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I was like Wash or Airy, Washington or Arizona. Some of the dinged up players should be rested. We won't win a Super Bowl without certain key players. It's tough. Dazza, right? Because you look at Arizona and you look at Washington and you say, oh, these aren't all hands on deck type games. But the flip side of that is they're trying to get the number one seed and you can't falter. And if you do get the number one seed, you also get the bye, which gives the whole team rest and not just individual players. So I do think there's a balancing act. I also think that if there is any concern that these players can get injured any further, they shouldn't play, regardless of who it is, because it is the regular season. But if they can go and they can go safely because that number one seed is so important, I think that these guys should try to play. And then that way, long term, they can do something that their future self will thank them for in the moment, which is getting a bye week, because I think that bye week will be crucial for them. And not just those players, but the whole team. So, all right, here it is. The title of the show, which is the biggest threat, the Eagles or the Cowboys. Now, I think we both agree that the biggest threat is actually injury. We
Right.
talked about that the last segment. However, they do have to beat teams to actually go to the Super Bowl. And looking at the landscape, I know that they boat raced Dallas and then they walked Philly just a couple weeks ago. in your opinion, at this moment, and really kind of future forecasting going into the playoffs, who is a bigger threat to the San Francisco 49ers and their chances to get to a Super Bowl? Is it Dallas, or is it Philly, or is it just a completely different team that I am not listing here?
And I think we're thinking just out of the NFC, right? Because
Yeah, NFC to get
AFC
to a
is
Super
different.
Bowl, get to the Super
Yeah.
Bowl. Yes.
Look, I've always been extremely high on Philly. I going into the season, my answer would be Philadelphia is the biggest threat. However, for me, their inadequacies in the coaching, I didn't realize how much of a drop off they would have with these two new assistants. And their defense is nothing close to what it was last season. And their offense was nothing close to what it was last season. So for me, just strictly off of, and look, we've had tons of success against Dallas, right? Over the last few years. However, I do think that the coaching staff in Dallas is much better than the coaching staff in Philadelphia. So for me, when it comes down to playoffs, when it comes down to where coaching matters, I think that Kyle Shanahan will have an easier job against Sean Desai versus Daniel Quinn. And because of that, I'm going to say Dallas is going to be a bigger threat. But in my eyes, 49ers are the favorites in both of those games. So I'm not saying that they are going to lose to these teams, but out of the two, who I think is going to be the toughest battle, to me, it's going to be Dallas because of the coaching differences from the Eagles to the Cowboys.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is a very good question. RS says, are the Cowboys that much better than when we first played them? I think they are. And I think the big reason that I would say that is because they had a new play caller this year in McCarthy. And I think it took a while for him to fully unleash what it was that he wanted to do with this offense. And you really didn't start to see that take off until about midway through the season. And then you saw this ascension from the offense, scoring points, Dak Prescott, everything. So I do think they're better, but I also think the 49ers are a lot better. I don't think they've closed that gap on the 49ers by any means. But right now, in trying to forecast who does hold a better chance to beat the 49ers between Dallas and Philly, I would have to agree. I think it is Dallas. I think Dallas right now is playing with a lot more confidence. I think Dallas is the healthier team. I think Dallas is the fresher team. I think Dallas has less issues across that roster than Philadelphia has. And I agree. I think they're the better coach team overall. I think Philly's in a world of trouble. I don't know if Philly doesn't get the first round bye, which right now it's trending that that's not going to happen. I don't know if they make it out of the first round. And I know it may sound crazy because they're probably going to play like, I don't know, Green Bay or the Rams. But right now, if let's say the Rams make the playoffs, if the Rams make the playoffs and they play Philadelphia round one, are you confident that Philadelphia is going to beat the Rams with Matthew Stafford playing as well as he has, not only against the 49ers defense, but also the Ravens defense? Those are the two best defenses in the league. And you've got a pass defense that is as bad as Philly's. You have guys like Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp with Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay, and Kyron Williams, who's a budding running back. I don't know how they stop him from scoring 35 on him. Can you outscore that team? I don't know. I don't know that I would pick them to beat the Rams right now, especially on a neutral field. It would obviously be in Philadelphia, but I don't know, man. I just I think that Philly right now is in a world of hurt, and it's going to be very, very hard for them to get back on track. But we'll see. I will also say that they've had a gauntlet of very good teams that they've had to play here, and maybe they're just a little bit worn down, and they can get it together for the playoffs. I don't want to discredit their championship pedigree that is on that roster, either through national championships or Super Bowls of their own. But right now, it doesn't look good for Philly. I would bet on Dallas being a tougher out than Philly at this point.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the three teams that are vying for the number one spot, the Eagles have the easiest path to win out, right? 49ers obviously hold all the tiebreakers, but the Baltimore game is much tougher than any game that the Eagles have on there. I think that the toughest game they have is Seattle this next week. Dallas has the toughest. Like they're going Buffalo. I think they play Detroit somewhere in there,
Miami.
So yeah, they're playing some heavy hitters there. But yeah, I mean, just going back to it, ultimately, to me, I think coaching matters a lot more in the playoffs. And I was just, I just have no faith in Sean Desai. Unfortunately, he's skin folk, man. That's the only Indian coach in the NFL, like in ever, maybe in any kind of like football, So props to him for being able to. But man, he that defense really took a severe step back, and they haven't at any time looked good this season. So I think that that's going to be tough for them to play to beat the 49ers with that defense.
Yeah, and Mickey, you're right. I mean, if Seattle beats Philly, that's going to tell us a lot about the Philadelphia Eagles. I know, again, they're on this tough stretch, but if they lose 3 straight, and I think they have an extra day. It's Monday Night Football for them this week, so they do have an extra day of rest. Finally, this is going to tell us a lot about them. It really is. And if I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, I'm not feeling great about things right now. I don't know how you could. I really don't know how you could. All right, let's get to the final topic here. It's been a little over an hour. Sunil, thank you for giving me your time as always. Question is, do you like Bosa playing in the interior? And this question, I believe, is brought up from the point that the 49ers have done a fantastic job of moving everybody around. There was a moment last week where you had Bosa, and not just last week, it happened really after the bye week, but Bosa and Chase Daniels lined up side by side, meaning one of them was playing on the inside, one was playing on the outside, just to give yourself the best matchup. So Bosa playing on the inside doesn't necessarily make, I think, at least in my opinion, doesn't make a ton of sense on first down or second down. But on third down, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think just getting your best pass rushers on the field, regardless of position, makes a lot of sense. What do you think about Bosa playing on the interior? And I guess maybe the question is, did you raise this topic because of some of the injuries that they have on the interior? Or because you've seen it play out over the last couple of weeks in kind of that NASCAR package that they've run famously the last couple of years, and really in particular 2019?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I didn't notice it as much the last few weeks. I definitely noticed it last week, right? And I was under the impression it was because obviously Armstead was out and then Hargrave went out as well. So that opened up the opportunity for Bosa to play interior, because obviously Kinlaw, Kalia Davis, they're not as proven as Bosa. So you want to you give him the opportunity. Bosa spoke about how he wasn't fully confident yet because he doesn't really play interior, and it obviously is different for playing on the edge versus interior. However, it was intriguing to me because Randy Gregory and Chase Young, especially Randy Gregory, man, that boy hustles. Like he is running all over the place. Like he does not give up on plays. It doesn't matter.
Farrell
if it's
also, Cleveland Farrell also.
Yeah, Cleveland Farrell. So this is the first time in quite some time where I think, and these are all really highly drafted players. Cleveland Farrell is a top 5 draft pick. Chase Young, top 5 draft pick. I don't know exactly when Randy Gregory was drafted, but I'm pretty sure he was drafted in the first few rounds as well. There's a lot of talent there, and these guys are playing because they know they have a chance to win a Super Bowl. They understand, that their opportunities aren't going to be as much as on their previous team. So whenever they're in there, they're just giving it their all, giving them the opportunity to play on the edge. And also it's harder to defend Bosa if he's moving all over the place, right? When he's just lining up on one side of the ball, you can kind of, put in a running back there. You can have him chipped by a tight end. You can move coverage over to his side. But if he gets good at playing interior as well, especially with the advantages we have on the edge with the depth that we have on the edge now, it seems like it could be kind of like a way to keep the opposing offensive lines off guard, and a way to continue to have Bosa just give him an opportunity to really get some more one-on-one action against players that aren't used to the talent of Bosa, at that position.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you can mix it up, whether he's switching from left side to right side, he's running stunts, he's standing up, he's lined up on the interior. I think just getting your best pass rusher with the best possible matchup on third down is the way to go. And so if you think there's a weakness on the interior side of that offensive line, then line him up there. If you think the weakness is on the outside, the right side, the left side, line him up there. If you think that they have trouble when you show them blitz and then you run a stunt, then do that. Whatever it takes, whatever you see on film to get Bosa the best opportunity possible to be effective and be a game wrecker, do that. And I am all game for him lining up on the interior in passing downs. And I think, kind of to your point, really, especially with some of the injuries they have on the interior, third down specifically, if you can get Chase, Gregory, Bosa, Farrell, and you have all four of them on the field together, that is going to be your best opportunity to get after the quarterback. And I think that that's scary for any quarterback that lines up and sees those four across from you. You better get the ball out very, very quick.
Has there ever been a defensive line with that many top 5 draft picks on it? That's wild.
I don't know about top 5 draft picks. I mean, obviously the Eagles defensive line was phenomenal last year. There's been some great defensive lines, but that many top 5-ish pick. Was Cleveland Farrell a top 5
pick?
He
was 4th by the Raiders.
What pick was Randy Gregory?
I don't know Randy Gregory, but Chase, Bosa, and Cleveland, I definitely know were top 5 draft picks.
I think Randy fell because he had some issues, I want to say.
But if you put Armstead on there, you got 3 top 10, right? Armstead was 10th, 9th, or 11th. I don't know.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean Armstead's in there too. Somebody who's you say Google it, but I don't know.
Why is it always on me? Why do I gotta be the
No. Hey,
no, I'm saying,
Google.
Brother.
No, but I'm saying I tried to. The problem is that somehow my default browser has made Yahoo the homepage, and I've got to change it. And anytime you Yahoo anything, you don't ever find the answers you're looking for. Google is way better. Shout out to Google.
So Randy Gregory was 2nd round, 60th overall.
Okay, I think he was labeled as a first-round talent, but like I said, if I remember correctly, he had some issues coming out of college, some off-the-field things or effort issues or something. I can't remember, but yeah. Anyways, you're right. I mean, if you add in Eric Armstead, you've got 4 first-round picks. It's crazy. I know. You're right. It is excuses. You know what? Way to hold me accountable, GTC Reels. You're right. It is just an excuse ultimately. Brother Bob says, only way we don't win a Super Bowl is if Kyle craps the bed, period. He's on your guy, Kyle. I don't know if that's the only way, but I think that's definitely a way.
Brother Bob plays hard, but he loves Kyle Shanahan.
He does.
He loves Kyle Shanahan.
You're usually harder on the people that you respect the most.
That's it.
Real quick, before we get out of here, you're a UFC fan or an MMA fan. I'm an MMA fan. I hate when people call it UFC. And I just did it. That was stupid. You're a fan of the UFC, but more importantly, a fan of MMA.
Yep.
Who do you have in the main event this weekend?
My heart wants Edwards to win because I don't know what a championship Kobe Covington as a champion is going to be like, but
it's going to be chaos.
If it stays on its feet, Leon wins.
Yeah.
If Kobe gets him down, Kobe wins. And I think that Kobe Covington saw the way that Usman, Kamaru fought Leon and understands he's got to get it to the ground. So I expect it to be what Masvidal says, crotch sniffing. I don't think Colby stands in front of him for more than 3 seconds before he's doing a double leg. And I think that Colby's going to win 5-round boring fight, to be honest.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of pressing against the cage, not being able to take him down, or Leon Edwards popping back up. And it's just going to be Colby standing chest to chest with him on the cage, trying to take him down, working through it, trying to wear him out. And that's probably the way that he wins as well. Raymond, this is so funny. I used to hate it. I loved it. Like, so when UFC was new, I was in middle school. It was like UFC 1. And I started training from like the age of 14. And I really have never fully stopped. I've dabbled in and out my whole life. But when I first started, people were like, "Oh, you train UFC?" I'm like, "Yeah, I train UFC. That's what I do." I used to hate
train
it.
NFL? You train NBA?
You train NFL? You train NBA? Yeah, that's what I do. I train NBA, man. I train NBA. It's so funny though. That was like the big thing. Oh, so you train UFC? Huh? Yep, that's it.
Hey,
So,
but shout
very,
out to
very
Dana
funny.
for basically making his league synonymous with the sport. That's pretty
Yeah.
crazy. Honestly, though, for anybody that is MMA geek like me and Jesse are, the fight I'm looking for is Shavkat versus Thompson. That's the fight that I'm most excited about on the card. Shavkat to me is a future champ. And depending on how dominant he beats Thompson, if he does beat Thompson, is going to be interesting, because I know Bilal is next in line for 170, but
Supposedly.
for whatever reason, Dana doesn't want to give Bilal the shot, or UFC doesn't want to give Bilal the shot. So if Shavkat could go out there and do what he's been doing to a guy like Stephen Thompson, I pick Shavkat over anybody in 170 right now.
Shavkat's incredible. I'm looking forward to the Ian Gary fight as well. I think this is going to tell us a lot about who he is as a fighter. I think there's a lot of pressure on him. A lot of people think he's the next big thing. That division's very tough, man. And we could be looking at 2 future champions between Shavkat and Ian Gary.
Right.
And they're both on this card as well. So it's going to be a fantastic card. I cannot wait for it.
And we didn't even talk
GTC
about
Real-
the co-main. What's the co-main? I forgot. It's another title fight, isn't it?
I don't know. I haven't even. Is it? It's yeah. It's is it the bantamweight title?
Yep. Oh, Pantoja versus Royval.
Yeah.
But it's not for the championship.
No,
Sorry.
no. It's a bantamweight fight though, I think.
Yeah.
GTC Reels, yeah. And we found that out real quick. If anybody remembers, if you're an MMA guy, if you remember when Hoist came back and fought, he fought Matt Hughes, and how sad that was to watch. We knew about 15 years ago that those guys were a little in over their head, because Matt Hughes was very good at jiu-jitsu at that point, and he was a well-rounded fighter. And not even that well-rounded compared to the guys now, but compared to Hoist and them, very, very well-rounded. So there you go. All right, y'all.
Oh, yeah, Pantoja is the champ. It is the championship fight. It's flyweight. Yeah.
Okay. That division has gone so up and down. And I will say, self-admittedly, I have not been into MMA the last probably 24 months the way that I was, where I watched every fight, even if it wasn't a pay-per-view. Now it's like I'll catch every other pay-per-view. I just, between this, with this taking up so much time, and family and all that, I don't get to keep up on it the way that I would like to. It's like I got to choose, and 49ers take precedence, because I got to know what I'm talking about here more than I do MMA at this point. So that's where it's at. But yeah, you're right. He's beaten Moreno a couple times, I think. It wasn't the first time he'd beaten him. So anyways, that being said, y'all have a great night. I'll be back tomorrow behind enemy lines. Peace.